Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bill and Ammon's Bogus Hangout. Our guest today is Terry van Horne. Hi, Terry. Welcome.
Hi, all. Terry van Horne, SEO Pros.
And I'm Bill Slawski of SEO by the Sea, and I'm the Director of SEO Research for Go Fish Digital. So we were talking about indexing bugs, Terry.
Yeah.
Before the show started.
Yeah.
And it's spreading.
Yeah. Microsoft's got them now. It's like a case of the COVID.
So let's go back in the past a little bit. Google's been having indexing bugs involving canonical links being incorrect.
Yeah, and they also had a mobile indexing problem, which was de-indexing. Do you remember that? That was at the same time, but they fixed that a little quicker.
Well, it makes sense that they would go to mobile first indexing because so many people are connecting to the web these days on mobile devices more than are connecting to the web on desktops. I guess a phone is cheaper than a desktop computer, but not by much.
Yeah, but I would say if you don't have a responsive site, it's mobile only. Because I can tell you I have a few still HTML sites that are not responsive and nowhere to be found.
Really?
Yeah, nowhere. Not even in the regular index. Or last time I looked, they weren't there.
Okay, so Google has, and I guess Bing now, have been pushing more and more things that are technically enabled, like HTTPS and mobile-friendly responsive sites. Technically, it's becoming harder to be included in a search engine's index.
Yeah, it's not just about visibility. You can be visible, but be invisible because your site isn't mobile friendly. Which I'll be testing some of that. I have sites that are on it now, and I want to see how long it takes them to pick it up once I take it off the old HTML, non-responsive, and put it on AMP or another. Maybe WordPress. However, it's starting to annoy me every day a little more.
WordPress is?
Yeah. Especially now that Gutenberg seems to think it should correct your HTML, throw in all kinds of other gobbledygook that's not needed.
Yeah, it's sort of like a case of the inmates running the asylum.
Yep. No. Makes AMP look that much nicer.
Gutenberg is supposed to be an HTML editor, which means it's no longer something to help you with your content. It's something to help you design your content.
Yeah, but it doesn't do a very good job of that.
I installed the classic interface for WordPress.
For that reason, probably. Yeah. Yesterday, 25 minutes trying to get something to load. Figured out after it was Google. They were erasing it after so it'd be there. I'd save the page and it'd be gone when the page loaded again.
Okay. That doesn't make it too good of a CMS, does it?
No. Or you put valid HTML in there and it says, I don't get this, and says no. You got to redo that. To me, it's just starting to become annoying. And it could be me, not the editor. It just means I have to go back to good old Notepad.
Yeah.
which for me, when I did the work with AMP on a WordPress site, did not get the results that I should have.
What were you expecting?
I was expecting the AMP page to look like the AMP page should, but it didn't. And I'm sure it's because I did it in WordPress. And whatever in the version of the theme I'm using, once I put, the plugin I'm using from the actual AMP project,
right,
it pulls the code right out of the page after it saves it, and you can't really even edit it that easily. You would have to go to your AMP page on Google to edit it.
Okay, that sounds like a hassle that most people wouldn't want to go through.
Yep. Why I think less and less people are using AMP. Why not? It isn't as widely used as it should be, based on what I've seen.
So AMP is an abbreviated version of HTML. It's a simplified version. It's supposed to be faster because there's less things to run.
Yeah, and actually AMP, I can agree with that, but then too, I think it also is set up as structured data for their protocol buffers, which is what has me really interested about. And why it can run faster, I believe.
So instead of like coming up with a simplified version of HTML, submitting it to the W3C as a new version of HTML and setting new standards, Google said, no, we're just going to come up with this AMP thing, and you insert a plugin in WordPress,
and
it'll rewrite your HTML for us.
Yeah. As I understood AMP, the protocol buffer, what it actually does is look at your HTML, interpret it, and then put it into its own code in the index, right?
Yeah.
So, that to me alone makes more sense to use that.
So Carl just said in the comments, it does image optimization too, I guess. Does it optimize images?
Yeah, probably. And, which is every theme that I've looked at almost in WordPress does not really give you the ability to provide different images for different devices. I had to hand code that. I found one theme that actually did do that, but not very well. So you could shut an image off in mobile. So for instance, if you had a big slider up at the top of your website and you didn't want that on mobile, you just tell it to, show this picture instead.
I think we're going to have to make a list of things we don't like about AMP and have a special anti-AMP episode of Phone Ammon's Bogus Hangout.
No, we'll do pros and cons. You can do the cons. I'll do the pros.
I got to note that, but yeah.
That is something I want to cover in the near future anyway. So.
Yeah.
And I did code one page from that's all AMP.
Yeah.
To see how long it would take to code a page. Not very. Actually, I thought it was easier than WordPress.
So it seemed like Google was moving a little bit away from AMP in some things. Like they were allowing pages to appear in top story carousels that weren't AMP.
Is that because they're losing confidence in AMP, or there was not enough pickup of AMP yet to only use AMP in those, and they think it's a good thing, so they want to be as inclusive as possible there?
They're holding that AMP dearly, and it seems to go against their concept of fail fast, which they apply to lots of other things. They come up with some new technology like Google Wave. It doesn't do well. It disappears.
Right. I think they'll give this a chance myself.
There are too many benefits from having people create pages and run them on Google servers.
Yeah, I don't think it was a mistake that they started talking about the protocol buffers. In fact, when they give out a piece of information like that, I never think that it was by mistake. I think it was planted.
They seem to chum the waters and throw bait out every once in a while. Something like Google protocol buffers. Doesn't get mentioned too often, but it does every once in a while.
Even when they first announced it as parallel indexing, I was surprised because nobody talked about it.
I mean, the first time I heard of protocol buffers was like 2014.
Right.
And it had been around for years before that. But
2006 actually is when they started that.
They didn't really make it too public.
Why would you?
Well, it's like VED codes in Google search results. If you look at view source instead of SERPs from Google, you can see VED codes.
Right.
And VED codes can tell you what type of result something might be, whether it's a local result, whether it's knowledge panel, so on. But if you don't know that, it doesn't help you any. And there are a few places that have learned about it, and that's how we end up getting things like the Moz forecast or so, because they're aware of what VED codes are.
Gotcha.
It's not something that gets talked about too much in the SEO world, though.
Right, because for a lot of people, it's just not something they really are that interested in. Whereas guys like you and me would read about it for days, given the material. It goes to most SEOs just want to learn how to rank a page. They're not really that interested in the nuts and bolts or,
Well, yeah, I want to peek behind the curtain. I want to see what's
me too.
happening behind the scenes. Yeah.
But you know how the butcher says I don't have to.
Right. It's sort of like watching Laws Made. You don't want to work in the sausage factory and see everything being ground up.
Yeah, and also a butcher doesn't have to put his head up the cow's ass to know it's a good steak.
Yeah. There have been Google local product carousel display bugs. I saw a thread in Twitter this morning about those. And they were showing from people who do local SEO incomplete product listings where they show just pictures and no text. Yeah. And it's like, that's not going to help sell those products, is it?
No. With no links, especially. Or prices.
Yeah.
Which means there's just a breakdown in data.
So the last thread that I saw dealing with those showed Barry Schwartz saying, okay, it's been fixed. Yeah,
I think some of that stuff is on mobile is pretty easy to fix. Special stuff they're doing on mobile. Yeah. Which again comes down to how they're actually interpreting HTML on this page now, right? that they can do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one thing that I did consider in regards to all these indexing issues is the only other time that I can remember both Google and Bing having the same or similar problems was 302 hijacking stuff that went back to the early 2000s.
So Google has come out officially and said that the Google Search Console lack of requesting indexing has nothing to do with the bugs that they're experiencing.
Yeah.
The word I heard about the bugs in Google Search Console was that they're changing infrastructure. And until they make those changes, they're not going to allow requests for indexing. But I'm seeing content from my pages indexed quickly anyway.
Yeah. You know, who's to say that it's not some quirk in a theme or something that's causing these issues, right?
Yeah. So I published a new post and I searched for it a couple hours later in Google, and it's there, and it's saying published 2 hours ago when I published it.
And it has the right canonical.
Yeah.
And that's what was alarming to a lot of people was it was changing the canonical on the page, which would cause real big issues.
Mm-hmm. So I sort of like being able to go to Google Search Console right after I publish something and add the URL. It makes me feel like I'm actually influencing what Google indexes. I've got some control over it.
Yeah.
Because historically, Google has indexed pages on the basis of a combination of how often you update and what type of page rank you might have. And that determined how often it would come back, check your site, see if there's something new, and index it.
You're saying that's not really true anymore?
I think to a degree that's true, but I think Google's like this on demand where people request something be indexed. Or there was that pub, sub, hub, dub.
They still use that, don't they?
I haven't heard that they've stopped.
Right. Which would mean if you have, or they were also using FeedBurner, which has stopped, correct? As far as for pings, I think they were using FeedBurner at one point too.
I think FeedBurner's still in business.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
So there you go. If you're signed up to FeedBurner, they also get that one. And there's also, I think all blogs automatically go to something called Ping-O-Matic, which Google also watches. So.
And Google's been paying attention to the product feed information they get from e-commerce sites too.
Oh, definitely.
They're using that to index some content. Like when they want to know the difference between an iPhone and an iPhone charger, one's an actual product, one's an accessory. If you search for iPhone accessories, they won't show a list of iPhones.
Right.
Because they're using the product feed.
They're categorizing the pages too.
Yeah.
Which they would say, oh no phones here. They want accessories. Whereas before you would get both because related items in there probably mentions accessories in a lot of cards.
Right.
I really, when I was working with the Google product feed, I really liked that. I found it really easy to optimize for.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple terms too.
So David in our comments is saying hitting the request index button is the best part of launching a new page. I'm not sure it's the best part, but
hitting the publish button, period, is the best part. You can say, I finally finished this thing.
I like sharing it on Twitter and Facebook and
seeing what the reactions
LinkedIn
are.
and seeing responses start coming in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it only matters to me when I see it on the first page of Google. Until then, I don't really, consider it much.
And if you hit that publish button and do a search for the term that you optimize it for, and you see that you're like number 1 out of 8 million pages, that's always fun.
Yeah, for sure.
And you see it like immediately after you press the button. So you rank that way right away.
Yeah, I've seen that. For a term that was very, 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 very non-competitive. Result of keyword research. But the thing is with those ones, once you own it, you own it. It's pretty hard to knock you out of that number 1 position.
It is possible, but it's
hard.
Not easy.
Because anybody doing research on that may link to somebody, yours is going to be right there every time. And the first one they probably look at.
And if what you publish is good enough to be a resource that other people might link to, being found early is probably
very important. Yes, for sure. For sure. And people don't really put a lot of stock in mentions and links on Twitter and social accounts. I don't care, no followed or not. I think Google pays attention to.
It's likely, from what I've read from the patents and stuff like that, when you see carousels for top stories for news items, Google is looking at social shares to determine whether or not a certain story is a top story.
Oh, really? So that's being influenced by top stories is influenced by Twitter?
By shares, yeah.
Oh, I'll have to remember that one.
Not necessarily the specific article, but the story behind the article. So what the article might be about. They'll determine what is a top story, what types of stories are actually trending. And when I say stories, I don't mean articles. I mean actual events happening in the world.
Topics around a story.
Topics around a story.
Right.
And that's they use shares to determine whether those stories that their topics around are popular enough to show a top story article about.
And those are quite often news sites because those kind of being centered around top stories, of being centered around news.
Breaking news type stuff. Yeah. Where it shares in the concept of social sites with the fact that they're not usually things that accumulate a lot of links quickly, but they want those to rank well.
Those should be getting mentioned in the social channels rather than getting linked to.
Right.
Because that makes actually a lot of sense.
So you can determine freshness by some type of burstiness thing.
Right.
Like Google did a thing on featured snippets where they were talking about answers like, why is the sky orange? When people in California were asking, because smoke from the wildfires was causing the sky to turn orange. And so they were determining geolocation, where the question was coming from, and they'd say, why is the sky orange? And say, oh, they're asking from San Francisco. Well, it's because of all the fires from
around there.
And they're using burstiness. So they're understanding because of new topics of new content that's being indexed, and also new queries that are showing up in query logs.
Yeah,
They can
so
determine
if you were doing search news, right? Even if you're not on Google News, writing about those and getting them tweeted a lot would probably get you into top stories, even though you're not a per se news site.
It's possible, yeah. It's one of the potential signals they would track.
Right. Interesting. That's something I plan on maybe doing in the future. So
there's another story recently. It was about the number of links per page.
Optimal number is actually 0.
I had a page that had like a few thousand links on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I put my site through the Moz spam test thing. And it pulled that page up and said that was a spammy page.
Yeah.
And it was a spammy page because the people in Moz thought that a page shouldn't have more than 100 links because 15 years ago, Matt Cutts said a page shouldn't have more than 100 links.
Well, actually, Google stopped indexing the links on the page after 100.
They stopped indexing the links on the page after 100. Are you sure of that?
Pretty sure. Or they didn't look at links after 100.
Okay, the page I had the links on, it really didn't matter whether or not they indexed the links from that page or not.
Right.
Just as long as people could click on the links and go to what I had linked to.
Yeah.
Which
was it a sitemap?
No, it was I wrote a page about a bunch of patents that were
a heading and a list of links to different patents.
It was about 1,000 patents that IBM had sold to Google, and I wanted to provide links to all the patents that IBM had sold to Google. I thought about it. I realized that it really didn't matter much. The only ones people cared about were the search-related ones, and there were about 15 of those. So having done the work and having gone through them all, I was able to link to those 15. So I just kept the links to those 15.
Yeah.
And got
but
rid of the
it's not
rest.
Actually, it was never ever a spammy page. It's just not well thought out.
It had no intention of being spam.
Right.
And the idea that I had all those links on the page had nothing to do with spam. It was just a poor assumption on the part of whoever wrote that article, whoever implemented the tool.
Right. Well, there's no accountant for Moz tools. I mean, I only recommend those to people that I dislike a lot.
So I remember when Matt said something like that, no more than 100 links per page. It was, and he backtracked on saying that it was bad practice. He said, from a usability perspective.
Which is my issue with all sitemaps in general. If you don't provide a description as well, your sitemap is nonsense. Because it just overwhelms a user. You've got 100 links on a page that are just a link, no description of where they're going or why they go there.
I always valued categories for sitemaps, HTML sitemaps. If you're going to use them, categorize them. Both Apple and Google had sitemaps. I think they may still. I think the Apple one still exists. The Google one may be gone, but they actually categorize them really well so that you can find stuff easily.
Yeah. Even better, I found, was to just make an index for each category and put all the links on one page in a category. with a good navigation to that page works better than a sitemap. And from an SEO perspective, you're starting one rung lower on the ladder when you're starting from a sitemap.
What do you mean by one rung lower on the ladder?
Well, if you look at each rung on the ladder as a hierarchy in the structure of the website, a sitemap would be under the home page and the category links off of it. So in other words, a link off the home page would say have a in the old days PR4. If you looked at the sitemap, it was PR3 because it was one rung lower on the thing, unless it had a bunch of links to it.
Right.
Right. So what I always found very interesting was when I found a site where an inner page had more page rank than the home page.
The PageRank toolbar was actually a useful tool.
For that kind of stuff.
It showed some really interesting things.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when if you visited the New York Times website and you went to newyorktimes.com or www.nytimes.com, it was PageRank 9 with the www. If you took out without the www, it was PageRank 7.
Yeah, because more people linked to it using the www, and they weren't canonicalizing. Marshall.
So it was a great example to show people why there was value in including your www
or canonicalizing
or doing a 301 redirect.
Right, canonicalizing.
Yeah. So we've sort of lost those examples that are like clearly evident. You can tell right away from the toolbar.
Why that's important.
Yeah.
You could also tell a lot of stuff about your site. If it was showing no page rank on a page on your site, it meant, hey, you got a problem here. You should do something about this.
Especially an older page.
Yeah. Right. Or a page that had links to it internally.
Yeah.
Right. That's showing, oh, you got a problem. Even worse, the gray bar. Which means, we don't like this page at all. We don't even want to hear about it. Usually an indicator of spam.
Yeah. It's sort of like now you visit in search results, you look somebody up, and you see their homepage, and it's got that little snippet that says there is no information available for this page. It's like that's a tough way to tell that a page isn't getting any page rank, but
yeah, that's a hard way. Not good for the clients to see, that's for sure.
Well, I visited a politician's page and I saw that, and it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Yeah, I decided not to let him know.
Yeah, I've seen stuff like that. But the one thing I didn't get about that is no one mentioned that actually the optimal number is 0 from an SEO point, because as soon as you put an extra link on the page, that reduces the page rank, the equity that the page can pass.
It used to be very mechanical. The number of links on a page meant what a certain percentage page rank was being passed through each link. But it now,
I don't think they do it like that anymore. But
it's not equal. It's not even.
Right. But it's still, if you know, putting dumb links on a page, like if it doesn't have good reason, to me, it always reduces the equity that page could pass. Regardless, it's got to be less. So when I put a link in context, it's because I think it's important.
Right. I remember doing calculus, like a little mini cost benefit analysis for each link that I would add to a page. Is there a value in this link? Will people find it useful? Will they find it helpful? Is it worth linking to the place I'm linking to?
Right.
How well do I trust the people I'm linking to provide value, the same value to my customers as I do?
Right. And that's how links always should have been done. Right. It's with that in mind. Whereas it became where SEOs wanted page rank to be such and this and that, and anchor text to this and and saying, oh, it's only a PR1. I don't care if I get a link on that page. Well, today's PR1 is possibly a 7. Something happens.
So Carl wrote in the comments, Google will have to index pages on the basis of alphabet and alphanumeric. Will rank pages on the basis of alphanumeric names. See.
That would be Yahoo circa 1995, 96.
Yeah.
Where A1 cleaners, A1 something or other started every category.
The Aardvark Cleaning Company.
Yeah. A1. Or number 1.
Right. So is that how AAA, the driving place, got its name?
Not sure. It was pre-Yahoo, but if it was after Yahoo, I would say there's a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that goes a long ways back, alphanumeric search engines.
Yeah.
I believe ODP was like that too.
ODP was like that, which is why the Google directory, which used the old ODP, and ODP had allowed people to do that, to clone ODP and organize content any way they wanted. So the Google directory was ODP listings organized by PageRank.
Right.
Because while alphanumeric makes some sense because it's easy to find things as long as you know the alphabet.
And the category that would be in, which, some of those would have 15 different subcategories. So, yeah, that to deal with too.
And you're allowed to show things in 2 different categories, a topical category and a geographic category?
Yeah. Or they had 2 indexes by country or whatever as well. Most of them.
Yeah. So what do you think of Google Passages?
I think it's going to be interesting myself.
So Google's talking about passages as if they're different from featured snippets.
Well,
I'm waiting to see what they actually come out with in a month or so. They're talking about it's going to be visible in a month.
Yeah, here's one of the differences that I think we'll see between them. I think that the rank of a page that gets a featured snippet, you basically have to be one of the higher ranking sites, or at least on the first page. Right?
Right. That's true with featured snippets.
Right. But with passages, because they're treating it as what did you call them? Query dependent and query independent, which independent is links. They could actually say, well, this is a very relevant passage, but the links pull it down. It's not on the ranking as high that way, but it's the most relevant for this query when you don't count in links. I think they might be tempted to dampen links on passages.
So they were talking about ranking passages using query dependent and query independent signals. When they were talking about query dependent, they were talking about like how many times the term in your query is included in that passage.
And the heading around it, etc.
Right. When they talked about query independent signals, they were talking about does it use complete sentences or incomplete sentences? Does it use how many words total is in the answer?
Oh, I thought it was also independent of the query word links.
Independent of the term may mean other signals, like how long is it? Is it in a list? If it's in a list, are they all like one sentence list items?
Right, I hear that. But you don't think they could do something different with links for passages that they might not do for featured snippets?
I think the ranking passages, they're not too concerned about links to the passages.
Right. Which would mean the ranking of a page would have less to do with the passage that's presented.
Right. The query independent part of it is we're looking at lots of other signals that have nothing to do with the actual terms of the query.
Right. And they would, I would assume, treat those as not as important as the relevance of the words in the query.
They're combining the two. They're like to do with ranking pages by query dependent and query independent signals. It's a combination of those.
Right.
So they're either adding them or they're multiplying them, but somehow
or dampening.
Yeah.
And I think that they might want to dampen the linking part of it. I understand why they would want to have complete sentences and stuff.
Yeah.
I really believe that links are not very important to that. You know where I mean? They're looking at a passage, not the authority of the site and all that other stuff that goes into ranking a featured snippet.
So they're sort of doing two levels of ranking. Number one, they take the original query and they do a search on it.
Right.
And they get like the top 50 or so results. From those top 50 results, they look at passages on the pages from those results. So they've already done one level of ranking, one threshold, by saying, okay, show me all the pages that we might get answers from by providing a response to this query. And then the second aspect of that, the second level is, okay, now we're going to look at passages on those top 50 results, and we're going to rank those. So they're doing two levels of ranking.
You don't think that they're going to show passages for every site?
There was a white paper that came out not too long ago from a bunch of people in Australia that showed an example of a set of search results with one featured snippet at the top results, and then a set of results right next to it where they were all answers. They were all answer passages. Instead of links to URLs to other pages, under the featured snippet, they showed like 5 different featured snippet type results.
So 5 passages under that.
Right. So it was a page of search results that were all answers. They're all answer passages.
Yeah, and that's where I think they're going. I won't be surprised if you get just a page full of passages now and no old blue links type stuff. Title, meta description, link.
Okay, so Google has said in all the answer passages, I've gone through 4 different answer passages patents, and they've said in each of those, some queries are queries that are answer queries. They are question queries,
right,
where searchers are expecting longer answers, passages.
Right. And others, they want pages because they're looking for a lot more detail.
So when somebody asks, why is the sky blue? They want actual answers. When somebody asks, what are the best restaurants in New York City? They want a list of links to restaurant pages.
Right. Which also fits into the assistance, right? How those kind of results would be very important for an assistant like Alexa.
Well, they don't want to venture too far from the original search engines where you provided links to pages on the web. You had an index of the web. You said,
right,
okay, here's links to pages. You can search and find the ones you like. So they anticipated, people asking when was George Washington born, how tall was Abraham Lincoln, what's the closest pizzeria to me,
which is kind of goes to my thinking that keyword research is dead. Entity research is what people should really be doing.
I think that's been true since the Knowledge Panel showed up in 2012, but I was optimizing pages for that in 2005, and it was effective.
Yeah, because I remember when we used to do FAQ pages,
trying
to rank them because Google seemed very interested in it.
See, we were trying to rank a page from Baltimore.org for the term Black History, Baltimore Black History. And we set the page up. We repeated the phrase a few times on the page. We talked about some related stuff. We ranked about 100 after 3 months. We said, okay, this isn't the way to do this. So I was working with a copywriter. I asked her, okay, give me a walking tour of Baltimore where people can walk around the city, visit famous sites of places like historic black colleges, historic black churches,
events,
residents of where people lived, right? Statues. There's a 9-foot tall statue of Billie Holiday in Baltimore.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. The Frederick Douglass, who was a slave when he was a teenager, escaped, became fairly rich, involved in shipping things, moved back to Baltimore in the 60s, bought 6 townhouses on the waterfront, the Inner Harbor. So, and those townhouses were really well known, and people visit them. People want to. So, having this walking tour of Baltimore where you could visit these places was what we came up for a page about Baltimore's Black history, because there were places people wanted to see, wanted to learn about. We figured that between the long tail searches for all these terms, we would get lots of visitors to this page. And so we weren't necessarily doing an entity optimization. We were doing a long tail optimization.
but inadvertently that would hit a lot of the, the talking points for entity search.
Absolutely. So it was like Baltimore history, Black history. These are the entities that appeared that people would be interested in.
Probably ranks
include
even
them on
better
page.
now.
That page didn't last, but they redesigned the site and they moved away from the keyword approach. And they turned Baltimore.org into a complete entity optimization type site. They optimized completely for entities. It's really well done.
Probably didn't do so well at first. Now it does.
Well, the Baltimore Black History page that we redid with the walking tour, within 6 months or so of it being online, or within 3 months of rewriting it and putting that up, it was the 6th most visited page on that site, over 300 pages.
Wow.
So it became fairly popular fairly quickly.
Yeah. That's usually the case.
And people were actually coming to Baltimore to visit those places, to take that walking tour, to see the places.
Yeah. Also, it beats people looking for something to do in Boston or Baltimore.
Well, in Baltimore, the site was a visitors center and a convention center for the city of Baltimore. So the purpose behind the site was to get people to come to Baltimore.
Right.
So if our webpage was doing that, we were hitting everything.
Yeah.
That's a better
even
KPI than anything else.
But even back in the early days of Google, we all thought they were theming. We called it theming. That pages based on a theme seem to do very well on Google. So in other words, tightly knit to a topic, not all over the place.
Yeah.
Which would be confusing. And probably the issue why they wouldn't rank as well.
I remember doing silos on pages where
never, ever thought it was a joke from the first time I read about it. I thought, this is stupid. I don't know why. I just did.
I like the idea of having a hierarchy of topics covered by pages connected to each other.
I get.
Yeah.
Right. But actually, when you say siloing, I think of where they were putting no follow on whole parts of the site.
That's not what I meant.
Okay, then that's how I basically build site too. I called it a hub, right? Yeah, the center is the index page. All the spokes are the topics that come off of that hub, which to me, that's the only way to build a site, because you can find from a search engine, generally, no clicks. You can go directly to that page very easily.
You have your main topic. From your main topic, you have subtopics that you link out to, you branch out. On those subtopics, you branch out to other subtopics.
I didn't go that far, but I usually kept it all on one under one index page. Might have even that broke down into, minor topics with headings and, always put a description. Those pages I can get to rank like crazy. Because again, very themed on, a specific topic.
Well, it made sense to do internal linking between those pages and link up and down and
from a navigational.
Get the benefit of hypertext relevance.
Yeah.
From doing that. Yeah.
For me, it was as much about, that's the way I thought that it was best to build a website too. because it made it easy to navigate and find things on the website, which to me, that's the number one thing that people, assess a website on is how easy is it to find what I was looking for on that website. To me, guys like you and I may care what a website looks like. I don't think people come into a website and say, oh, this is a terrible looking website, I'm going. I don't think so.
If you're not able to find what you're looking for on a website,
that's bad.
It's doing something wrong.
For sure. Very wrong. And that's probably your biggest impediment to conversion. Because they got to find it before they can buy it.
Yeah. I mean, I see people talking about using site search to identify what types of things people tend to be looking for the most from what you offer. But I also look at site search as an indication of what people are failing to find on your site.
Or and you are lacking in your navigation.
You need to do a better job of providing directions on how to get there.
Navigation, yeah. You have a navigational problem, not a page problem.
So if you're using your site search to augment your keywords, fine. If you're using your site search to improve your navigation, much better.
Yeah. What I found is when you looked at that, it gave you ideas for keywords that you may not have thought of and nobody else has thought of, because a lot of queries Google has never seen before. So this kind of gives you a insight into what's lacking.
Well, I think some percentage of all those queries Google has never seen before are things that people are searching for because they want to see something new. Like they say, Hockey October 2020. And it's a query Google's never seen before.
Right.
But it also brings right. But it also brings you to the latest hockey games, hockey scores, right?
Yeah. Or about next year's season now.
Yeah.
Because lately they've been talking about starting the season in January.
Right. So they're exploratory searches.
Right. Also, spelling errors would cause a lot of new queries, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah. When Google provides that prompt that says, did you mean such and such, they're still counting that query as something new.
Right.
Even though they're potentially anticipating it's just a misspelling.
Right. And if someone else entered that again, is it now not a new query? Or I believe it probably would be a new query.
At some point, they stop asking, did you mean? And just start showing you the results.
Yeah.
And say, showing results for such and such. Did you want to see?
Yeah.
And they show you your misspelling.
Yeah. Because sometimes the misspelling is what you want.
Sometimes.
Not often, but sometimes.
but if they ask people, did you mean such and such, and people keep on saying yes, then they say, okay, well, maybe that's not the way it's spelled.
Or this is something different than what we think it is.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking just because when they see one once, it's not like they keep it there and never count it as a new query again. I think it stays as a new query to them until it reaches a point that it's search a little more often.
Well, it's like when Flickr first came out, and it doesn't have an E. It's spelled KR, right? And I can imagine the first few hundred people who searched for Flickr spelled correctly. Google said, "Did you mean Flickr?" With
I bet they're still doing it.
I think it's popular enough now that they know it's a real site.
Maybe.
But popular misspellings happen. People say, okay, that's not a real word, but people will remember it.
Yeah.
Okay, there was a story from Search Engine Roundtable that was titled, "Crawling doesn't mean indexing, indexing doesn't mean ranking."
Yeah. That should be evident to everybody, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
that's been true from day one. Nothing's changed.
It just seems so obvious.
Yeah. But there are probably people that wonder. You know, if you've been around, like, say, just the last 5 years since they took the notation that you're in the sub-index or whatever they used to call that, and now, you know, they just don't tell you.
When you do a search and you look at all the pages, all the URLs for that search, and you reach a last page and they have the link, they have the text that says there are some results that we're not showing. If you'd like to see those, click here.
Right.
And you click on that and it shows a lot more results. Are those on a separate index?
Or what they used to call this. Oh, I'm trying to remember what they called it. My memory's getting bad.
Supplemental index.
Supplemental, right. Supplemental listings. That's what they're listing there. A lot of them are supplemental.
So those are supplemental results.
Yeah. Before they used to say it was basically something that was too much like another page.
Yeah.
Now I think it means we just don't fucking care. To put it bluntly, because I have pages on SEO Pros, they index and crawl. They still crawl these pages because they're, you know, you see it, but they're not indexing them. And they're old blog posts, like 4 or 5 years old. I used to call that blog rot, and I think there's a lot of blogs that you know, after a while, if it doesn't rank, they don't care.
Well, I had some old blog posts that I'd never bothered to write meta descriptions for. I didn't have images for. They were just walls of text.
Right.
I went back through them. I added meta descriptions. I added images. I rewrote aspects of them. Some of those got indexed. They get listed. They start ranking.
They got back into the index.
They're getting visited. Yeah.
Yeah. You know why? As soon as you edit those pages,
right,
that causes an indexing. And they see, oh, this page is changed, so let's take it out of the supplemental and put it back into the index.
Yeah. And I spent the time to optimize them for things.
Yeah. Now, I should have looked earlier, but I just went through SEO Pros and updated all the pages. So they were, you know, some of them hadn't been updated in a decade. Yeah. So I went through and, you know, just made sure that they were more current. Mainly just updating what I said back then and adding what's going on now, right?
Well, I use Grammarly. I did spell checking, stuff like that. It made sense to do.
Well,
And, you know, it's going through a lockdown here, so I
give
had
you
time.
something to do.
Yeah.
Beats watching Netflix.
It was nice to go through the old stuff that I'd written years ago, and remember what I'd written about.
Yeah, see how much things have changed, and you know that this is still useful because it explains what's going on here. That's why I think people who disregard information about search engines because it's old, that's not a good idea. That this stuff is all built, you know, on, and it keeps building onto that. So what we see in the old days, right, it's still pertinent. And that's, you know, what's people like yourself and myself that have seen all these things over the years, that's a definite advantage to us as the owners. Because we've seen these changes and see how it affects search and what they're more likely to change and that sort of thing. I don't think you can know that unless you've been doing it a very long time.
Experience does make a big difference in how you approach things.
Yeah,
and
as long as you don't have to prove it.
I've worked with clients and introduced them to old school methods of doing things that they have told me I would have never thought of doing that, and say, how did you come up with that? I said, necessity.
Or we did that in the past and it worked. This should work here.
Yeah.
You know, I really see the value in understanding how these things have evolved over the years.
Well, we're past the top of the hour.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Most definitely. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yep. Have a good one.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.